Yo, what is going on, family? Welcome back to yet another episode of The Platform. I'm your host, I'm your teacher, Mr. Bonolo Menu. And on today's episode, we are still dealing with source-based questions. I have a few more source-based questions that I have come across throughout the year since my last video. And I think you could actually learn a couple of things or two. Now, these questions are questions that always come up every single test, every single task, every single examination. But it seems like the Department of Education is trying to come up with different questions to ask us during examinations and tests so as to avoid being repetitive or being easy to remember or to cram or, predictable. We don't want questions to be the same years as the time goes by, So this is stuff I've picked up along the way, and I've actually learned how to teach and how to answer myself. And this is me trying to teach you. Once you master this, and I'm sure you've seen with previous episodes, once you are able to master this, no source-based question can be a problem for you. And I believe we can conquer the source-based questions. A lot of people avoid these and rush to jump to essay questions. That's good. It means you are able to answer essay questions. But you should not be afraid of source-based questions as they are simple, according to me. So, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the platform. So, like I said in the beginning, we have a couple of questions that I want us to look at. And I'm just going to tell you all of them for now so that you know what to expect in the video and prepare yourself as we go. The first one we're going to be looking at is definitions, giving definitions. Now, some of you may think that this is a simple thing and you may undermine it, but I've seen quite a lot of people actually struggle giving definitions. And that's because definition questions come up in two ways in the history context. Now, they can give you a definition of defining your own words, and they can then give you a definition of define in the context of. And that's something I'm going to explain as we go. The second thing I'm going to show us is how to list. And I know it may sound simple, but some people actually have a challenge with that. Thirdly, I'm going to show you how to quote from a source. And the fourth one, how to identify information from a source. Some people confuse the two. Lastly, we're going to look at comparing sources. Now, in other videos, we have already done comparing sources, but it seems to be a bit of a problem once again, because there's more than just one way of comparing sources. When you compare sources, you look for similarities, but you could also be looking for differences. And I want to show us the difference between those two. How a source supports another source, how a source differs from another source. And the last one we're going to look at is limitations. What makes a source limited, or how do you know if a source is limited? The limitations of a source. So let's get into the first one, giving definitions. Now, when you are giving a definition, you can come across two types of questions. There's the simpler one when they tell you to define a particular word in your own words. Definition is not as simple as just saying what the thing is. You must look at the question. Remember, we are in an exam. This is a history exam. So there are ways to answer questions. You don't just answer haphazardly. So when they say define a word, you must just check, define it in what manner? Must you define it in your own words, or must you define it in another way? When they say you are supposed to define a word in your own words, then that means you are supposed to give a dictionary definition or anything close to the dictionary definition of that word. When you're giving a definition in your own words, it's something that is close to the dictionary definition. Now, the tricky question is this one. When they say define when they say define this word in the context of 1, 2, 3. This part is the most important part here, because they are telling you, don't just give us a definition. Give us the definition of this word in this context. What does the phrase in the context mean? When they say in the context of, it simply means how this word was used or how this word was applied in this particular situation. Remember, you are talking about a particular topic here, whether you are studying the Cold War, whether you are studying the French Revolution, whether you are studying apartheid South Africa. That the name of the topic itself gives you a context. It is a particular situation. It is a particular period in time. The word can apply differently because it's used in that way. Let me give you an example, a wild example. In my school, for those who don't know, I'm teaching in South Africa, and in South Africa we have a government program which gives food to children in schools. It's a feeding scheme program. Every day during lunch break, kids get a free meal. Now, in the school that I teach at, we have the same program running. Now, the kids at my school don't want to call the free food a feeding scheme, or they don't want to call it a free food package or whatever. They gave it a different name. And this name, I think, is cool, what they did there. They call the food they get McDonald's. And I'm sure you know McDonald's is a fast food restaurant. Now imagine I gave you the question, define the word McDonald's in your own words. If I say that, you are going to give me the definition that you get from the dictionary, or if you Google it, right? McDonald's is a fast food restaurant. That would be your answer. Now, if I said define McDonald's in the context of Mr. Menu's school, then McDonald's is no longer the same. It is actually something else. McDonald's in Mr. Menu's school is the feeding scheme program that the kids get every day during lunch break. It is funded by the government, and it helps alleviate hunger and helps kids concentrate during class. That's my final answer. So the trick here, when you are defining, is to look at how you are supposed to define it. Yes, you're going to define, but how? Do they say define in your own words, or do they say define in the context of? Be careful when you answer that question. The next question we're looking at is how to list from a source, or listing, or answering in a list form. When they say you must list, you must look at the marking allocation first of all. The marking allocation tells you how many marks each answer has. So if you are doing 1.3.1 and it's telling you to list, that means you're going to see how many marks they have there. If they have 4 marks, then that means they need 4 answers. When you take your pen and you start writing down, you are going to write the first bullet point, give your answer, second bullet point, give your answer, third, fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4 marks are yours. So when you are listing, use numbers, bullet points, or symbols for each and every answer. You need to provide a clear list of facts or points that are required by the question. And here's a tip. Usually the answer is in the source. The third thing we are looking at is the difference between quoting from the source and identifying from the source. I'm going to start with quoting from the source. When you are quoting from the source, now you know it's taking information from the source and putting it in your answer, and then you have your full 2 marks, right? Some people actually go to the lengths of quoting half of the source. Hey! Please, don't do that. You must stop. Please. That's not quoting. That's simply copying and pasting. That is plagiarism. That is a crime. Anyway, when you quote from the source, try to look for something that answers the question. Don't just take the whole phrase. You must look at the parts that answer the question. And also be careful. They will tell you what to quote. Don't just quote. Look at what you are supposed to quote and then quote that particular thing. It's as simple as that. Second thing, when you are quoting, how do we know that you quoted? You don't change the words. You take the words as they are and you put them in your answer. Thirdly, when you quote, you use, what is this? Oh my God, it's running away. What are these? What are these? I know, look, this happens to you too. quotation marks. When you quote, you use quotation marks. Those small little ears, those bunny rabbit ears, at the beginning of the sentence and at the end of the sentence. This indicates to the reader that you have taken this somewhere and put it there. It's not your own words. Again, when you are quoting, you are not using your own words. Avoid that. And I know you love these quoting things, and I'm sure it's simple for you. So remember, when you're quoting, use quotation marks in the beginning and in the end of your answer. Here's an example. Let's say we're talking about apartheid and you have a source that is talking about apartheid. And the question asks you to quote something in that line. If your source says, the apartheid system oppressed millions of people, that is your answer. You are taking it as it is. You don't just say oppressed and then you think, I'm done. No, this one I killed it. Yeah. Quote the entire phrase, the entire sentence, and then put your quotation marks in the end, and that will be your final answer. Take it as it is, paste it. Now, the difference between quoting and identifying is very slim and is a bit of a challenge for many of us. And you just need to know what they want you to identify. If they tell you to quote, you must know what you are quoting. Read the entire question. Don't just say quote and then don't just look at the first question, the word in the question, quote, and then look at the entire sentence. Read the whole thing. And then you will know what you're supposed to quote. Identify. Read the entire question and you will know what you are supposed to identify. Let me read from my notes here. When you're identifying, you should mention or you should point out specific information from the source that answers the question. You are simply pointing it out. You are not copying the entire thing. You are mentioning the thing itself. You do not need to quote the exact words, but you must mention what is clearly stated in the source. So you don't just simply copy the entire thing. Sometimes you will because that's the answer and you cannot change it, right? But in some other situations, you just simply tell us, identify the thing that they're telling you. Here is an example. If the source discusses the actions of the apartheid government, your answer might be, the apartheid government enforced racial segregation on people. So if we are talking about the actions, what did the apartheid government do? Identify the things that the apartheid government did. Let's say that's the question. Identify the things the apartheid government did to its people. Your answer can vary based on what the source is telling you. If the source says it punished, it tortured, it arrested, it jailed, it banned, it oppressed, then you can say people were oppressed. That is the message. That is the gist. Quoting, take, paste. Identifying, read, understand, take, paste. You need to avoid also just cutting and pasting all the time. Cut, paste, cut. Try and read and understand the source. Let's move to the next question. On question number 5, we are looking at comparing sources. There's that question of 4 marks, which is a higher order question, where you are expected to answer, where you are expected to compare 2 sources. One source, maybe source 1A, with source 1B. Comparing these sources, you can find a lot of information. You could compare and find the similarities. You can compare and find the differences. These 2 sources are similar in this manner. These 2 sources are different in that manner. You just need to look at what the question is asking of you. If the question is asking you to compare how source A supports source B, then that means it's looking for similarities. Where are they similar? Is source A talking the same thing as source B? For example, imagine we are studying apartheid. One source is a newspaper, one source is a picture. This newspaper tells us that people were carrying passes or dom passes, documents that showed their identity. And then we have a picture. The picture is a picture of a man showing a pass to to a police officer. Source 1A and source 1B, do they differ or are they similar? Compare whether source 1A supports source 1B. Compare whether source 1A supports source 1B. Your answer will then be source 1A supports source 1B because it talks about how people were carrying passes, while source 1B is a picture showing a person carrying a pass. Secondly, source 1A also mentions how police officers would demand to see the passes, whilst source 1B shows us a police officer asking for a pass. In that way, you got your 4 marks. You got your 4 marks. Remember, when you are answering this question, combine the answers, put them together. Source 1A and source 1B, source 1A and source 1B. Combine them together so that you can get 4 marks. Don't do this thing of saying, source 1A says 1, 2, 3, you jump, you come. Source 1B, in that way, you're not going to get 4 marks. You're going to get 2 marks. The other 2 are going to evaporate. Yeah, they're going to just wither away because you didn't do what you were asked to. When we're saying compare, you're supposed to say left and right are like this, left and right are like that. Source 1A, source 1B are like this, source 1A, source 1B are like that. To do a shortcut, and it doesn't always apply, but I've told you before, when you want to do a shortcut, you could simply say source 1, both sources talk about. Let me read from my notes. How do you know if 2 sources support each other? The first thing is these 2 sources have the same facts. They are talking the same thing. If both sources say the same things about an event, they support each other. If you and your friend were arrested for stealing sugar or for stealing sweets from a tuck shop somewhere, your stories need to match. If you or your friend says something different, then you are not supporting one another. Sources are the same. If this source says something similar to that source, then that means they are supporting one another. Secondly, if they have the same conclusion. If both sources explain the event in a similar way or have the same opinion, they agree. If they both agree on one thing, then that means they are supporting one another. Thirdly, one refers to the other. If one source mentions or uses other sources as evidence, then that means they are likely to be in agreement. So that simply means they are corroborating in the history English, my friend. Yeah, corroboration. We look for corroboration of the source. If this source and that source are corroborating, they are talking the same language. They are chewing the same gum there. Yeah, okay. Right. Now, let's go to the differences. How do you know if 2 sources differ from each other? How do you know the difference between 2 sources? Sometimes they are not going to say, look for how source A supports source B. Sometimes they're going to tell you, look for how source A differs from source B. You need to then look for how these 2 differ from each other. What is the difference between the 2? It's simple. This one is talking about this, that one is talking about that. Those 2 things are not the same. Let me read from my notes. How do you know if 2 sources differ how do you know the difference between 2 sources? Different views. If the sources explain an event in different ways, they are from different points of view. If the sources are talking about the same thing but differently, then that means these 2 sources, they are different. Secondly, if they have conflicting facts, if 2 sources talk opposite things about the same event, then this means that these 2 sources are different. For example, if your friend and you get arrested for stealing from a shop, and then they ask you, what did you guys steal? And your friend says sweets, and then you say salt. Then this means you are talking different things. This means that these 2 sources, source 1A and source 1B, are different. That is the difference between the 2. Now, when they ask you to check if two sources support one another, it simply means you are supposed to check if the two sources are talking the same thing. They are similar. You will have to write your answers in this way. Put them in one answer, jump a line, put another answer. Source 1A and source 1B are talking about this. And don't be shy and just say, no, they are both primary sources, or no, they are talking about apartheid. Say exactly what they are saying about apartheid. Don't say they are talking about the Cold War. Both sources are talking about Stalin. Both sources are talking about racism. Don't do that. That is wrong. You are supposed to say exactly what they are saying. Source 1A discusses how Stalin refused funding to go to Eastern Europe. Source 1B shows us Stalin on top of a roof shooting down aeroplanes that were delivering in Eastern Europe. You see, you said it exactly how it's supposed to be answered. Don't just say they are both talking about Stalin and you think you are fine, you are done. My brother, my sister, you are very wrong. You are very wrong. Please. And then the next question is difference between the two. When they give you a question that says, explain how source 1A differs from source 1B, then that means you are supposed to look at how these two sources are not talking the same thing. Perhaps one source lied or exaggerated or missed some information. Then you are supposed to say, source 1A is talking about Stalin refusing funding of the Marshall Plan, whilst source 1B is telling us that he accepted. These two sources are not the same. These two sources are different. I'm glad you get it. Let's move to the next question then. On the next question, we are looking at the limitations of a source. Sometimes they don't ask you about reliability. They don't ask you about usefulness of the source. By the way, those two questions, I want to make a separate video for that. For now, we are going to look at the limitations of a source. How do you know if a source is limited? How do you know the limitations of a source? They give you this question, they ask you for 4 marks, and you are supposed to answer. This is how you know if a source is limited. Write these down, and I'm going to explain as we go. The first thing that tells you that this source is limited is the fact that the source is biased. Biasness means it is one-sided. If the author may have a personal opinion or a specific agenda that affects how the information is presented, then the source is biased. If I'm creating something or a source, or I'm writing an article in the newspaper, and I'm talking about the soccer team that I don't like. You know me, I don't like that particular soccer team. Then that means I am biased because I'm not going to give you proper information. That means I am a limited source. The source is biased because the source is limited because it's biased. The second thing that makes the source limited is omission. Don't be scared by this word. Omission simply means that there is some information that is missing. Maybe they didn't tell you the other side of the story. Maybe they didn't tell you how many people were there, how this happened. Some information is clearly missing. You can see, no man, they are only telling us the side of the victims. What about the perpetrator in the TRC? Number 2 is omissions. The source may not provide enough information. It may leave out important facts, making it incomplete. The third answer is the time period. Perhaps the source was created later on. Then that means the source might be limited because it might not have all the information. The person was not there. They are not a first person perspective. They are a secondary source. Perhaps being a secondary source does make it a bit limited. These people were not there during the event. If I was there and I witnessed everything and I took a picture, then that means I am not limited. You know for sure this guy was there. You trust the source. So the time period matters. Time period. If the source was created a long time after the event, the author might not have first-hand experience, leading to possible errors, exaggerations, missing information. So time period matters. You just need to know how to say this when you're writing. You don't just simply say the time period and you think you're done. You must say, this author wrote this source a long time after, and therefore this source is limited. Perspective goes back to number 5, sorry. Number 5 goes back to the first one of biasness. We call this one perspective. The source might show one point of view, such as that of a certain group, class, or nation, which can limit overall understanding. Like I said in the beginning, if I don't like a particular soccer team and I write my sources about them, or I create a source, I am going to speak negatively. I might exaggerate. I might take out some information and not give you everything. All of those things, they count. You just need to open up your mind when you're writing these and you look for these clues. Clearly, if it is a source from Germany during the Cold War, they are not going to say nice things about America. They're not going to say nice things about France or the East. Why? Because they believe in communism. Those ones don't. They believe that those are our enemies, and therefore we can't speak praises about their Marshall Plan. They're going to make it look bad, and therefore the source becomes limited. You, my brother, my sister, we have spoken a lot today, and I hope you have learned a lot. Do say if you didn't understand anything. I will always be here to create more content for you. If there's anything else that is missing, let me know. If I didn't explain something properly, let me know. This is a discussion, and as we go, we can't necessarily script these things, and that is why some of these things I might miss them. Let me know if I did miss anything, if you want me to re-explain something or show you or demonstrate to you. I can do that for you. I'm going to create social media platforms for us to engage a bit further. I'm going to provide them at the end of the video. Find me on WhatsApp, find me on Instagram. Hopefully I can go to TikTok and many others. Keep subscribing, keep sharing. Don't forget to like at the end of the video. Thank you very much. See you next time.